We are very kind of pleased, very proud to be here today because it's always the most kind of exciting thing that you get to do in your tenure as APG Chair. And it's a kind of great moment to be able to be on the stage today and to start talking to you about the philosophy of the awards in 2013 and the things that hopefully many of you in this room will be planning to do in order to try to win one of our awards. This is the beginning of 3 different events that we're going to be doing. So we'll be doing tonight, and then we'll have 2 specific how to win events that will be coming up, and I'll give you more details of those towards the end of the evening. And you can obviously find details on our website. But the next one we'll be holding at our media partner, The Guardian. So we'll be over there talking particularly about the shortlisting process and how that works, and then we'll be back here at Google after that to hear a little bit more again about shortlisting and also about presentations. But I'll give you details on dates of those as we get towards the end. So the way this evening is going to work is I'll say a couple of words at the beginning just about the ethos of the awards, and then we have a fantastic lineup who will be presenting in accordance with the APG's time-honoured timekeeping rules, where we will obviously be exactly on time and not be running over at all. But first of all, we will hear from Adam Morgan, who will talk to you a little bit about what he is bringing to his role within the awards as the chair of our jury, and talk about what he's going to be looking for. We will then be hearing from Andy Nairn, particularly about the shortlisting process and what he's going to be looking for at that stage of the awards. And then we will do our kind of Civil War reenactment of a couple of the winning papers from last time. So Neil and Richard will talk through the paper that M&C Saatchi wrote about Dixons, and we'll give you the presentation that they presented that helped to win the joint Grand Prix for them last time. And then also Mihir Wati will talk from the perspective of Low Worldwide about the case for the Colombian government against FARC, a case which has won in pretty much every single awards category you could mention. So it's won creative awards, it's won effectiveness awards, and indeed it won our joint Grand Prix last time around. So you'll be able to see the kind of thing that they presented last time in order to win then. So a couple of words about the philosophy of the awards to begin with. Every time we do these, the APG is of course looking for the fundamentals of what it always looks for. So these awards have always been about the creative contribution that planners make to great work, the creative strategy that they bring, and these awards of course are no different to that. So this is about the role that planning plays in getting to great ideas in the end. That's evolved over many years, of course, and it used to be much more of a relay race where it was very much about what brief did you write that you handed on to the creative teams. Nowadays, of course, it's a much more blended process, and the idea of planning has spread far beyond the traditional advertising agency, and the awards have evolved to really reflect that. So it has been and will continue to be about the effect of planning, not the effect of planners as individuals. So it's about the discipline of thinking that gets to great work in the end. This time around, I think what we'd like these awards to be is pretty much the most generous APG awards ever. We're hoping that everybody who's writing will be thinking most of all about the learning that they can contribute to other planners. There will, of course, be glory at the end of it. So some people will walk away with gold awards, some people will walk away with Grand Prix. But at this time in planning's history, I like to think about planning and the APG Awards in particular almost as kind of advertising and communications R&D department, because we're the people that can see how things are working nowadays. We can see how certain kinds of inputs lead to certain kinds of executional outputs and how those executional outputs work. So if there is any kind of a theme, any kind of a spin to these awards in comparison to awards that the APG have done in the past, it is this focus on what is the learning that we can deliver back to the community of planners? What is the learning that we have about how planning works nowadays in all of its many forms? And of course, that can be as much about the process by which we get to a traditional piece of TV advertising as it is about the process by which we get to a very tech-driven piece of multi-channel engagement planning. Both of those things are, of course, fascinating pieces that we want to learn about nowadays, but with the emphasis on what have we learned. We're also hoping this is going to be one of the most inclusive and wide-ranging APG awards ever. We are hoping for entries from traditional creative agencies, of course, but also from client companies and from new kinds of agencies that have maybe not considered entering the APG Awards before, because planning's influence has spread far beyond traditional advertising agencies. We're hoping for entries from the UK, as we always get, but we're hoping for more entries than ever from around the world. The APG Awards has always been international in its flavour, and I think the fact that one of our winning cases last time comes from Colombia is a great testament to that. So we will be very keen to get those kinds of entries in. And we'll be looking for entries that come from many different kinds of organisations, so not just agencies, but also potentially client organisations, also potentially from the public sector, from a variety of different places where we can really reflect the way that planning has become about so much more than what traditional planning departments can do, and ways in which we can kind of really multiply the learning that we're delivering back. So, without further ado, we will hand across to our speakers. We are going to kind of move through at some pace, through Adam, then Andy, and then the two cases from last time, and then Adam, Andy, and myself will retake the stage at the end to take your questions about the process, what the judges might be looking for, anything that you can get from there. If you have any particular questions as well about the presentations that you're going to see on the Dixon's case or the Colombian government case, then these guys will be here as well to take those questions too. But we'll proceed briskly through the presentations, so note your questions down and we can return to those at the end. Thank you for coming and enjoy the evening.
Thank you. I guess to some degree, one of the most obvious characteristics of a planner is curiosity, really. It's not simply that we're interested in the act of creation, we're interested in the learning and the exploration and the connection that leads up to that act of creation. And it's particularly frustrating, therefore, to me as somebody who watches the advertising business, that the advertising business doesn't spend enough time on R&D. Advertising agencies don't spend enough time on their own R&D, that really kind of deep learning that kind of characterizes quite a lot of progress in any business that you look at. And in many ways, for me, I suppose what makes the APG exciting is that it is, you could argue, effectively the R&D function of the advertising business. And deep learning is actually quite hard, isn't it? It's quite easy to do shallow learning. We can all skim and scan and read a bit of this and put a bit of that together. But actually sitting and really interrogating why something works and how it works and how that's changed and how that's connects with other bits of learning that we've observed and seen, that's really a precious thing. And for me, I think, certainly as the chair of the judges, it's going to be a really enriching and exciting experience. It's funny that tonight happens tonight because actually I have a very small company, there's only 16 of us in it, but we're closing our doors to business and doing a learning week this week. So literally sat down and spent some time with 5 interviews today and then sat down for 2 hours and discussed them back to back, and really interesting and stimulating, comparing, not simply the things obviously on their own, but comparing the learnings from each to each and adding them up and contrasting and comparing and all those kinds of things that learning consists of. And we'll do the same tomorrow and the same tomorrow and the same tomorrow. And as stimulating as that is, it absolutely pales into insignificance compared with the body of learning and the body of thinking that all of you are going to generate for the APG and with the APG, right? You're going to effectively, I think there were 150 entries last year, of which 40 got shortlisted. I'm sure there'll be more this year, from all over the world. Finest strategic minds, finest strategic narrators, telling the most interesting stories about some really challenging brands, all created by yourselves. So you're going to put all of these into the shortlisting panel. Andy will talk a little bit about how that shortlisting is going to work. And I'm really going to enjoy discussing those shortlisted with some of the, I guess, the best minds in communications, right? We've got the judging, the final judging panel is Andy, who'll be representing the shortlisting panel, Sue Onneman from Mediacom, Guy Murphy from JWT, Mark Lunn from Now, Sarah Benison from Barclays, Fern Miller from LBI, Emma Stamp, with his creative hat on, if you like, from Adam and Eve DDB, Greg Nugent, of course, one of the masterminds of the marketing 2012, who started his own company just in January, Ian Darby from Campaign, Craig and Sarah Speak from Google. So a really interesting blend of global planning directors, creative directors, media people, marketing people, journalists, insight directors, combination of previous winners on the one hand and equally people who are commissioning and rewarding that kind of thinking. So I think it'll be a really interesting yeasty mix into which to put your thoughts and ideas and strategic narratives. It's worth saying, I suppose, just a couple of things. I'm not going to go through all the rules and regulations and conditions. You can come across those on the site, and you can come up and ask us afterwards. Just two things, I think, that are interesting to talk about. One is, Craig mentioned, obviously, it's global again, and the fact that there will be no distinction at all in terms of where the thoughts come from. So everybody will be competing equally with everybody, which I think is a really interesting distinction as somebody who's new to the awards effectively. The second is that, as you know, in the final judging, there's always been a presentation. One of the differences this year is that that won't be the entirety of the marks, that the short listing will count for half the marks, the presentation will count for the other half. And finally, that in 2013 there will be, which is consistent obviously with some of the enthusiasms that Craig and I have been talking about, there will be an emphasis on learning and rewarding learning, and that will be part of what the marks go towards. And looking at learning around how comms work, how in the rapidly evolving world, obviously where technology is changing relationships between consumers and brands and ideas, how planning is flowing and evolving into that. And what it means to be a planner in that environment and a good planner and strategic narrator in that environment. So look, I left planning in '99. I'm kind of re-immersing myself in it as a part of this process. Really interested to see where it's evolved to, how much has changed, how much has stayed the same. And I mentioned at the beginning that curiosity obviously is a hallmark of a great planner. I think in a funny kind of way, showing off is another hallmark of a great planner. And of course, we do it in a very mature way, in a rather gentle way, in a very modest way. But it is something we kind of want to do. It's another itch we want to scratch. So you can't show off unless you enter, really. So I look forward to seeing what you've got. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Adam. As some of you might know, I've had quite a lot on my plate this week. I've had a few things to think about. To do with starting a new agency. So lots of things like names, really important stuff like wireless packages, what sort of loo roll we should be buying. Cheap seems to be the general consensus there. So I have to say, I can't pretend that I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to say about the APG Awards. So I'll get my excuses in early. But actually, maybe that's quite a good thing, because it's a good thing for you, because you get away a little bit earlier and you get home and you can swap photos of snow with your friends, which is what I think most of us have probably been doing today, as far as I can tell. Nice laddering of benefits there. Get home, do the snow thing. Won't work in Shanghai or Sydney if that's going out there, so apologies for the snow references. But it's probably quite a good, I was thinking it's probably quite a good thing for me as well, not to dwell too much on the APG Awards, because actually the thing that's always struck me about the APG Awards is that they're slightly terrifying in a good way, I think. Slightly humbling, because they've always been pitched at not just kind of good planning. So it's never been enough to win one of these things by doing some good, solid, strategic thinking, a nice little bit of customer insight, a little smart idea, clever bit of channel planning. That's been fine, but that everyday sort of good practice planning isn't what wins you one of these awards. It's been always about doing something beyond the ordinary, doing something really extraordinary and exciting. And actually, if I dwelled so much on all the great ideas that come out, all the great plans out there, all around the world, because we are now looking for these awards to be very much global, I might have given me sort of second thoughts. I might not have been quite so cocky about doing my own thing after all, because there's just so much good stuff out there. And actually, that manifests itself not just in the jury, who will sort of talk about the shortlisting jury in a second, but also in the criteria. And I know it's a bit boring, but in a sense it's quite useful just to know exactly how the criteria work, because as ever we're being completely transparent about it, but as ever quite a lot of people will probably not pay any attention to it. So if you are here listening to how we award the marks, it gives you sort of an immediate head start. So the first thing is to say that in order of scariness. First of all, you obviously need a great idea in the first place. So 40% of the marks across the piece are going to be about the size or scale or impressiveness of the idea. Okay. Then on top of that, you're going to have another 40% for the sort of storytelling ability. So the written quality of the paper, but also if you get through to the second stage, the way that it is presented. So it's not just enough to have a great idea. You've got to be able to sort of package it really well, because I think that's a really important thing about planning these days. The bigger idea, actually, the more you need to be able to sell it in and convince other people that it's not completely mad. So then you've got 10% on what Craig talked about earlier, the kind of desire to have a bit of new learning. So you can't just even have a great idea, really well told. It's got to actually tell people something new. And then on top of that, you've got another 10%, which is sort of slightly subjective, but I think, to my mind, goes to the heart of these awards, which is the kind of subjective, I wish I'd done that test. So it's it is pure and simple, the jealousy factor. What is going to make us absolutely sick at the idea that we haven't done it ourselves? And by we, again, like the final jury, the shortlisting jury is made up of the great and the good. So it's a really interesting mixture again of people from the best creative agencies, some of the biggest names in planning. So we've got the legendary Lucy Jameson now at Gray's. We've got the amazing Paul Coleman at Wydens, Alice Huntley from Rainey Kelly, Kirsty Sadler from BBH, Brian McCarthy from Ogilvy's. We've got Zoe Lazarus from DLKW Lowe's. On top of the creative agencies, though, we've also got people from other disciplines too. So we've got Alistair Green from Mindshare, Omid Hawazi from Sapient Nitro, Conor McNicholas from Redwood. And then from the media world, we've got Dan Cook from IT and Tim Hunt from The Guardian. So again, it's a really slightly terrifying mixture of people that you've got to convince. And so I'm kind of conscious that I've probably left it now. You're all thinking, oh God, it sounds really slightly horrific. It's probably impossible, unless you're Richard Story, in which case you're probably sitting back thinking it sounds like a piece of piss. I don't know why you're sort of making such a big deal about it. But for everybody else, apart from Richard, I can reassure you that it actually, of course, it's doable. And we want to encourage people to to do their best and get in with their best ideas and not be too sort of brutal with the papers. Although of course we'll be demanding. And I think the single most important thing you can do to give yourself the best chances, are apart from really knowing the criteria, is just having a sense of the written papers, going to some of the presentations, hearing some of the speakers that we're going to talk about later on. And listening from the horse's mouth to people like Neil and to Richard and the guys from the Colombian paper, because it's only by sort of listening how other people have done it. Obviously, you've got to find your own spin and your own way of doing it, but that's what's going to hopefully get you on the stage at the end of the year, picking up a gong. So I'll get back to thinking about other lofty stuff like loo rolls and hand over to the guys.